What's going on, guys? It's Jimmy here. Got some major news for you guys here. The Republicans passed their first bill with the new speaker, Mike Johnson. Sweden looks like it could be getting into NATO finally. Also, a government shutdown on the horizon and some major developments in one of Trump's major lawsuits. Take a look here. So Republicans passed their first new bill in just the House of Representatives. Remember that these bills got to get passed in the House and the Senate with 60 votes, which means Republicans and Democrats got to pass in the Senate, and then has to be passed by the president, who's a Democrat. This is where the problems lie. So House Republicans passed a sprawling partisan energy plan, the first funding bill approved on the floor since the lower house chamber ousted its speaker more than 3 weeks ago. Here's the problems. The measure passed in a 210 to 199 vote. One Republican voted no, and not a single Democrat voted yes. This is the problem, as you can already start to see. There's no Democratic support. So this was only a Republican bill, no bipartisanship. And, new Speaker Mike Johnson said, this is the first step in getting our appropriations done. Yesterday, I promised we're going to get back to work for the American people. And today, we proved it. But with no Democratic support, the bill is unlikely to pass in the Senate, and likely to, even if it did, get vetoed by the president. The bill cuts more than $5 billion in spending that was passed as part of the Democrats' signature climate tax and healthcare bill, which was approved without GOP support. As you can see, the legislation is unlikely to become law, as the White House has threatened to veto it already. So the problem with this stuff is that they're going through the motions and almost time wasting. So you almost wonder, what's the point of doing this stuff if you're not going to, if it's not going to pass ultimately? This comes as a government shutdown is coming on November 17th. And remember that that's part of the reason that Kevin McCarthy got ousted by the 8 Republicans led by Matt Gaetz, is because he even passed a 45-day continuing resolution and didn't shut the government down. So, again, we could be headed for a government shutdown, because if the Republicans, you got these couple Republicans led by that wing, Matt Gaetz, and a few others, who say, we don't want to compromise with Democrats. Again, I'm not from either party, just kind of letting you guys know here what's going on. Is that they don't want to compromise. So they're going to say either pass these bills or shut the government down, which could happen. Democrats are going to say, no, we're not going to do that. So we could be headed for a long, long government shutdown, which is very possible. Remember, the previous longest shutdown actually happened during former President Donald Trump, which I'll get to here in a moment. Some news on that. Also, new Speaker Mike Johnson here says that U.S. can't allow Vladimir Putin to prevail in Ukraine, which is actually what the vast majority of Americans think. The question here is just how to do it and how to make U.S. dollars most efficient, right? And because Vladimir Putin, the vast majority of Americans think, is clearly not a U.S. ally, right? New Speaker of the House, Republican leader now, Mike Johnson, said a victory for Russian President Vladimir Putin in Ukraine could empower China. Yeah, I think that clearly a lot of people are realizing this now. He says, quote, we can't allow Vladimir Putin to prevail in Ukraine. Yeah, I think a lot of people are realizing this. It doesn't matter who says it. We're all realizing this. We can't allow Vladimir Putin to prevail in Ukraine, because I don't believe it would stop there. That's right. And it would probably encourage and empower China to perhaps make a move on Taiwan. Exactly. We have these concerns, he said in an interview with Fox News host Sean Hannity. Quote, we're not going to abandon them, but we have a responsibility, a stewardship responsibility over the precious treasure of American people. And we have to make sure that the White House is providing the people with some accountability for their dollars. Exactly. He has shown skepticism towards more aid in Ukraine in the past, voting against two different appropriations bills that provided aid to Ukraine in September and last year. After gaining the gavel, though, he was asked whether to support additional aid to Ukraine. Quote, we all do. We are going to have conditions on that. So we're working, though. He said while walking to the Capitol in a clip posted to X, formerly known as Twitter. Quote, we want accountability and we want objectives that are all clear from the White House. And then, you see, you kind of realize here that talking about this stuff when you're, wanting accountability for the money, I get it. But when you realize what the stopping all this would do and letting Vladimir Putin and Russia win would be like for example, letting Hamas win, who just bombed, Israel. You got to kind of really wonder or realize what the opposite effect would be. Letting the terrorist groups win, letting the invaders win. And then sending the message to others who would do the same. Letting China do the same. You also got to send the message here to the other people, the people who are just now attacking American military troops, right? You got these, multiple different attacks on U.S. military bases, and now finally, the U.S. has sent strikes back. Why the delay is unbeknownst to me. It was absolutely there shouldn't even have been a delay, right? After the attacks, they should have struck back. Why the military or Biden or whoever was making these decisions, there shouldn't even have been a delay. There should have been strikes back literally the next day, okay? Unless they didn't know exactly where the strikes were coming from, which really could be the case. I mean, a drone comes from the sky, and it's very possible, right? I mean, it's quite possible, right? I mean, you're at a military base, and all of a sudden there's a drone coming from the sky. You shoot it down, or it just kind of blows up there. It's quite possible. But I mean, this is why you have intelligence. We're the United States of America. You do kind of maybe. The problem is if you just have a feeling of where it comes from, it's a little rough to just start sending attacks back. If you just have we think we know who did it, let's attack them. You gotta have maybe a little bit more than that. So this is where you gotta be prepared here. Say, do we want Vladimir Putin to just say, oh, you won? You got to remember here, we're seeing a lot of people say this, and we have for months. Vladimir Putin's not going to stop. He didn't stop when he took over Crimea. Here we are years later. He's taken over more. He's leaked over plans to take over Moldova, Belarus, and what was the other? There was another country here that he already leaked over plans to take over. Another country as well. You could look it up. I don't have it at the top of my head. But Moldova has leaked or has said multiple times they fear for their safety. They're a small country. They would get taken over like nothing. Okay. Vladimir Putin just kind of bit off a lot more than he could chew, trying to take over a country of 40 to 45 million people. And luckily, for Ukraine's sake, that with 40 to 45 million people, the world stepped in and backed them this time. If not, Russia probably would have taken over most of or all of the country if they didn't have the world's support. You look at the same type of thing here. What's happening in Israel? 2,000 missiles sent on, an attack on day one at a music festival. All the innocent people being, taken via hostage, grenades being thrown into bomb shelters. What's the message if the world, the United States, NATO, and supporting countries just say this can't be done? We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't allow this to happen. China is watching with bated breath, saying, we're watching what's happening in Russia. We're going to see if the world allows this to happen. We're watching what happens in Israel, which is probably Hamas is being backed by Iran and Russia. Okay, because when the US and NATO has to now start sending support to Israel, it's taking the support away from Ukraine, which benefits Vladimir Putin, which benefits Russia. And lo and behold, the United States and NATO starts tiring of helping Ukraine. All of a sudden they say, well, we're not going to help Ukraine anymore. We can't do it. All of a sudden Russia wins. That's Russia's goal, is to win the war. That's all they really care about at this point. Russia wins the war. They take a couple years to recuperate. All of a sudden, they do it again. They take over more. They're gonna likely take over Belarus, really through relations, right? Through just they're doing it non-militarily, and they have said on Russian state TV, on their own TV, that they want to put back together the old USSR. They've said it on state TV. I aired it on one of my old previous clips. Okay. So this is their goal. This is what they want to do. So piece by piece, whether it's through making treaties like with Belarus and through formal negotiations, or by taking over countries like Crimea and invading Ukraine, no matter what the reason that they come up with, no matter what they say, you know. And then you look at what's happening in Israel. China wants to take over Taiwan. Just look at the world. It's in chaos, you know. So you even see like a new speaker here like Mike Johnson, who previously voted against support for Israel. And I get that, American taxpayer money is at stake, even though we run a deficit. So really all the taxpayer money is already spent. But you have to think of the bigger picture. Do we want dictators and invaders to just go and invade at any given point? You got to really look back to Hitler. It was the same situation. And the problem was, I actually just seen this here, somebody talking about this recently. The US stayed out of the war in World War II for far too long. Right? The problem is the US always wants to stay out of war. If you ever look at sentiment with war, the vast majority of Americans, and really even most countries, right, unless you're the invader, right, like Russia or China, even if you probably ask most majority of average people in China, they don't want war, okay, unless you're the government trying to take over the country. Americans don't want war. Read the comments. Americans don't want war, okay? So America stayed out of World War II as long as possible. And this is the problem, right? We stayed out of the war until the last moment when we were actually attacked by Japan in Pearl Harbor. And same thing with 9/11, right? You look at all these, and of course you got all the conspiracy theories. That's the new hotness right now, is that the conspiracy theory with 9/11, the conspiracy theory with Pearl Harbor, the conspiracy theory with JFK, all the YouTube channels and the conspiracy theories of people trying to make you believe something else, right? Oh, Pearl Harbor wasn't real. All these things weren't real. We didn't actually get attacked with 9/11. It was inside. All these things, right? They're all trying to get you to believe someone else. It's all propaganda channels, right? They're all probably getting paid from somebody else to get you to believe something else, right? Okay. But the problem is that with the average population all trying to say, stay out of it, stay out of it, stay out of it, other countries, and don't get me wrong, I don't want war either, right? Who wants war? Who wants to send your son to war, right? I don't want to send my son to war. The problem with this is that dictators like Putin know this. They know the U.S. doesn't want to go to war, and therein they know the U.S. doesn't want to be involved. So they're going to try to take over territory. China's going to try to take. If you're China's leader, what does the American people want? They don't want war. They see the polls. Polls are literally, you see the U.S. polls every single week about every single thing, right? They see U.S. polls every single week about everything. They know the U.S. people don't want war. So if China goes and invades Taiwan, average everyday Americans are against war. Now is honestly the perfect time for the China to invade Taiwan. There's a war in Ukraine. There's a war in Israel. If China goes and invades Taiwan, this is now the perfect time for them to do it if they want. The U.S. is already spread thin. We're already low on ammo. I'm not the only one saying or knowing this or thinking this. You think they're not thinking this? I'm not Einstein. Let's hope they don't. But these are the things that Americans need to think about, and our defense needs to think about. This is why the new speaker, Mike Johnson, somebody who's been against aid for Ukraine, now that he's the speaker, he's got to come out. And he's realizing, he's saying now that he's in the leadership role, saying the reality of it is that if we stop this, we let Vladimir Putin win. And then we would let China win. And then we would let Hamas win if we don't help the cause. Do we want Russia to win? Do we want Hamas to win? Do we want China to win? Those are the questions that America needs to ask themselves. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. That's the reality of things. That's the overall end game. So I'll keep you up to date. If you haven't yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon. Click here to watch my newest video next. Thanks, and I will see you in the next video.